Is this good? Okay. So again, my name is Nadia Zedi. I'm a business immigration lawyer. I've been practicing law for over 10 years, and the majority of my work focuses on helping foreign national employees of companies obtain the proper work authorization to work in the US and working with creative professionals to obtain the right work authorization to continue to work in the US once they've gone to school here, or even if they're living abroad and are sort of procuring employment here in the US. So today I've been asked to focus on post-completion OPT and starting and running your own business. So that's what I'll focus on, and then I can open it up to questions, and if you want me to speak about other employment-based immigration options for individuals in your particular area of expertise, then I'd be happy to cover that briefly given the allotted time. So I'm sure you're all familiar with post-completion OPT. This is the 12-month period that you get after you have completed your degree program as an F1 foreign national student. So that period of time is when you can work in the United States and get experience within your field. Many times, foreign students want to start their own businesses. And so then there's lots of questions about how can you do that while you're on OPT, and what are the requirements, and how can you make sure that you are within the parameters of the law while starting your own business here. So there's three main requirements for starting your own business under the OPT program. And before I go over the three of them, I'll just read to you exactly what USCIS's regulatory language is on this issue. A student on OPT may start a business and be self-employed. The student must be able to prove that he or she has the proper business licenses and is actively engaged in a business related to the student's degree program. So what does that mean? That's what brings me into the picture, because sometimes USCIS language can be a little bit confusing, and you want to make sure that you're abiding by the regulations as you should be. So the first part of it is speaking about proper business licenses. So what that means is that if you want to start a business, you should incorporate the business. So you should speak with the business lawyer about incorporating the business, figuring out what type of legal entity it should be. It should be a C Corp, an LLC, so on and so forth. So I, as a business immigration lawyer, do not actually assist in business formation, but I work with co-counsel who only focuses on business formation and business-related issues. So that would include what type of legal entity should I be, what type of tax benefits, pros and cons are there to each different type of entity, and how will I get paid if I establish my business entity this way or that way. So if you go to an immigration lawyer, not every immigration lawyer will be able to do that part of it for you, but typically immigration lawyers do work in conjunction with business lawyers in order to assist foreign nationals figure that piece of it out. So that's the first step. That's figuring out what type of business entity you should be, and then incorporating your entity, obtaining a federal identification number or EIN number. So that sort of makes your business official. And that it also makes your business, depending on how you set it up, its own entity. So that you are not the business. The business is its own entity, and this can come into play as I will discuss in some of the other requirements. So that's the first thing. Once you have set up your business, you must show that you're actively engaged in the business. So that means you must be working for the business full time. So say that you set up I get asked this question a lot. A foreign national F1 OPT has started a business with a US citizen or green card holder, so they're partners in the business, and that's fine, as long as you are actively engaged in the business and you have your own title. So maybe your title is creative director or whatever. So you have to be working for the business full time. So that's an important part of it. And then the third part of it is that your business has to be related to your degree. So that's the whole point of the OPT program, is so that you can get a chance to get experience in your degree. So you've studied here for 4 or 5, however many years, and then the whole point is that you are able to now get practical experience within your field. So you can't go to medical school and then start a design company under the OPT program. You should start a business and work in a role that's related to your field. Are there any questions about those requirements? No? Okay, great. So those are really just the 3 main elements of starting your own business. So you can do it under OPT. You just have to make sure that you do it that way. And I think one of the main benefits of, if you're now I'm here at Pratt Institute, so I assume the majority of you creative professionals or trying to become creative professionals, is anyone in here a STEM professional? Science, technology, engineering, or math? Okay, you are. And you are? Okay. So, I mean, this would apply either way. But, I think that it's helpful to sometimes, if you know that you're going to eventually be an entrepreneur and work for yourself, or if your field is such that you will be an entrepreneur, work for yourself, because that's the nature of your field. Then the OPT program gives you a chance, a 12-month period, where you can sort of grow this business, or be able to actually see what it would be like to stay in the US and work in your field. So it gives you some time to do that. So that's one of the major benefits of self-employment under the OPT program. Of course, you would, if you go work for another employer, it gives you a 12-month period where you really build a trusting relationship with the employer. And then when the OPT period is coming to an end, the employer says, I like you so much, I'm going to figure out a way to sponsor you. So those are really the 2 main ways that you want to be using your OPT time here in the US. But it's good to have a plan. So sometimes you can't have a plan because you might not have any job offers. Sometimes starting your own business may be the only option because you weren't able to procure a proper full-time or part-time employer who is willing to allow you to work for them for this 12-month period. So starting your own business is, so you should always apply for the OPT, get that EAD card, and then utilize it in one of these ways. But then, of course, there are parameters around what should happen once you get your EAD. Does everyone know what EAD is? Employment Authorization Document. So once you have your OPT EAD card, you should not be unemployed for a period of more than 90 days. So if you get your EAD card and 90 days have gone by and you don't have an employer yet, then you're done. You should pack up your bags and get ready to go home. You must find employment or be working for your business within that period of time. And then after, well, first of all, are there any questions up until this point? Yes.
Could you specify, you said 12 months after I graduate?
Yes.
Or what is the starting point? And also second question, you said the EAD card. So does that 90-day limit start from the time I apply for the EAD card or I receive it?
So you are employment authorized once you have received your EAD card. There's a start date. You have to have the EAD card, and the start date has to have hit in order for that period to start accruing.
So one of the things I'd like to say to everybody here on this card, you go to the Office of International Affairs, and Allison is here tonight. So you know Allison. You talk to them about the EAD card and all of that. Another thing I'd just like to add in the area of design jobs, you may be working for somebody, going there every day, but you're still self-employed.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I want to make that clear. Somebody, like a recruiter, could put me in a position, or I could find a position, and that employer doesn't necessarily bring me on staff. They have me working for them,
1099.
but I'm self-employed.
Yep.
And so the Business Outreach Center brought with them some, like how you would bill the employer, and they'll send
Yeah,
here,
yep.
because in the design field, this
It's
happens
common.
a lot.
Yeah.
Even to U.S. citizens, they cannot get hired necessarily. They're hired as a freelancer.
Freelancer.
They go every day to the company, same place, same time. They can't miss work, but they're self-employed.
Right. And so you would get a 1099 in that case, which is a special form that you get as an independent contractor. And that's fine. You can have OPT and work as an independent contractor. You just have to prove that you work for an employer at least 20 hours a week. So that's also permissible. And again, for design, sometimes you might be working for an agency, and the agency might have you on their payroll or might have you as a 1099 employee. That also works as long as you can prove that that you're employed for 20 hours a week at least. You can also work for two employers as a 1099 employee, 20 hours for one, 20 hours for another, as long as you keep evidence and proof that you are.
However, I'm just going to say
Yeah.
this, I can work for one person 10 hours. And the other time, I can be working on my business trying to get clients.
Absolutely. That's right. I'm sorry, did I answer your question? I answered your question about, so you must, so the 90-day period starts accruing once you get your EAD card and the start date hits, and OPT is after you've completed all your degree requirements. So that's when you are allowed to apply for employment authorization.
And again, I'm going to stress that the Office of International Affairs has workshops on this. You'll get emails. Allison, wave your hand again. There she is. So you will be going there for all of this. If you haven't graduated yet, there's people in the audience who did graduate and they're on OPT now who are
Okay.
thinking of starting a business or have
Right.
started a business.
Okay. And then another thing to note is that if you obtain your EAD card and then say, oh, I'm just going to take a couple months off and go visit my family, but you haven't secured employment yet, that would be, and you're gone for more than 90 days, then you have basically not satisfied the requirement. So if you have obtained a job position, began working for the new employer, and then you tell your employer, I would like to take 4 weeks off to go visit my family, and the employer says, sure, no problem, that would be fine because you are employed and you're just taking time off. So that's important to note. And then one other thing that's important to note, which I recently got asked about, is if you get your EAD card and then you start working, but then you decide, you know what, this isn't working out for me, I'm just going to move back home, and then you leave. That's fine, you can do that, but you should inform the DSO or the International Students Officer at your school, because they do need to update your service record to make a note of that. Yes.
When we find that the work an employer during the ID card, how do we report it? How do we say we found it?
You would report it to the your International Students Officer, and then they would also want to make sure that it's related to your degree, and then you would always keep record of how many hours per week you're working, because as you move on your trajectory towards whatever path you take here, you want to keep all types of evidence that you've always maintained your status here in the U.S. So it's important to keep documentation.
Is it a minimum 20 hours for each employer, or can you have like 3 jobs that, collectively give you minimum 20 hours?
Yes, you can do that.
Or you can have one job that you work 5 hours a week, and you can be working on your business trying to get more clients.
Right.
Okay.
Yes, you just want to show at least 20 hours a week. Yes.
So if I have my own business, can I work for your company for full time, or it just need to be part time?
So if you're, as she said, if you're a consultant, then you can work for your own company some hours of the week, and then you're working for other businesses the other hours of the week. If you're working in a position, for your own company, which is not quite consulting, you should you should be actively engaged in the business. So if you're showing, now if you're not relying on just your own business to satisfy the OPT requirement and you do have other employers, then you're in a better position in some ways because you have another employer who's going to be paying you for the hours you're working. But if the only thing you're doing is your own business, then you do have to show that you're actively engaged in the business and you're working for it full time.
So the way you show you're actively engaged in a business is you have a website, you have business cards, you're keeping a record of every time you reach out to a company to try to get a client. That's actively engaged in a business.
Right.
So that you came here tonight and you met graphic designers and you're an interior designer, you're trying to network, that's actively engaged in a business. So you weren't here, but originally we all introduced ourselves.
Okay.
So it's like, do you see that's active, that's showing that you're working on your business.
Right.
I think her question was also, if I get a job at a company, can I make still, and I work there full time, can I make a business of my own too?
You can. You can. Again, it just depends on what kind of again, you still have to satisfy the criteria. The good thing with an EAD is that you can work for as many U.S. employers as you want to. So it's not, once you get out of the EAD phase and you're on a non-immigrant visa, such as an O1 or H1B, they are more employer specific. But when you have an EAD, you are able to work for multiple employers. Yes.
But you say multiple employers, it has to be all the time under our degree?
They have to be all related to your degree. Yes. Yes.
Are you allowed to work if it's not related to your degree?
You should not. Yes. So if there's no other questions about that, I'll just touch briefly on STEM extensions and how that would work if you have your own business. So if you're a science, technology, engineering, or math major, then you are eligible for an additional period of employment authorization beyond the 12-month period. And I think there's some confusion around whether or not you can be self-employed on the STEM extension. The regulations don't specifically say no, you can't, but they do say that you have to prove an employer-employee relationship. And so how do you do that? So you have to set up the company in a way, as I mentioned before, where the company is its own entity. So it's a stakeholder of its own. The company has the ability to hire or fire you. So say that you have a partner and you are an officer of the company, whatever role you're in, there would have to be some parameters around your business partner, board members, other stakeholders being able to say, you know what, you're not, even though it's your own company and you're co-founder or part owner, be able to say that, you know what, you're not really performing that well, so we're going to have to let you go. So you have to establish an employer-employee relationship in order to be able to meet the requirements if you are utilizing the STEM extension. And you do have to submit a more comprehensive training plan, which you should work with your international student officer. At my office, we've helped companies, complete the training plans and make sure that they're completed the right way. So that is the STEM extension. Are there any questions?
So, I'm gonna, I know the answer to this, but I'm gonna throw it on. I'm an architect and I'm eligible for STEM. And you're telling me if I make a company, there should be somebody who could fire me. So I'm from China, I make a architecture company, and my friend's from China, and he's my partner, so he could fire me.
Well, if that is, usually when you establish a company, there's articles of incorporation, there's documents in place which lay out what can and can't happen. So I think it goes back to the business formation and what type of entity it is and what the parameters are around the founders of the company. So yes, if the company is set up in that way, then there should be an officer or a board member or another stakeholder in the company that can fire you so that you can establish an employer-employee relationship.
But wouldn't it be better if it wasn't somebody from my home country?
Yes, of course, because that, I mean, then it looks more, sort of shady because you're just then saying that, oh, my friend in India, China, wherever is the co-founder and he can fire me. It should be, it's better if the stakeholder is here. Lots of companies have a board of directors or advisory committee or some other group that is involved in decision making. And that is the better way to set up the company so that you don't run into problems. And this is a similar requirement for other types of employment authorization, other types of visas. So there's H-1B, after the OPT period, you set up your company, what's the next step? The next step is you're gonna try to get an H-1B or an O-1 or some other type of employment authorization, and you will be faced with the similar evidentiary criteria, which is proving an employer-employee relationship so that your company can sponsor you for one of those other visa categories.
So again, I'm going to throw out a few examples.
Sure.
So I'm not eligible for a STEM extension, but I want to do a business the year that I'm here, right? So I'm doing my business and I'm getting some clients. Is there any way I can stay after that year?
Yes, of course. There's several ways.
I'm working for myself. How
Yeah.
could I stay after that year?
So one option would be the H-1B, which is a lottery, which again, the company should be incorporated in a way where you can establish an employer-employee relationship.
But what
You have
happens if
to,
I'm just a freelancer, kind of self-employed? I didn't make that.
yes, so if you're a self-employed freelancer, then you cannot sponsor yourself for the H-1B. Then you have to see if an agency or an employer is willing to sponsor you. And H-1B does not have to be full-time. So we've done H-1Bs for graphic designers and other professionals where a company sponsored them part-time. There is a prevailing wage requirement for H-1Bs. So prevailing wage is a sort of minimum wage depending on a lot of different criteria that we look up in the Department of Labor's wage survey. And it depends on which city you're located in. So the company does have to pay you that wage level. This can sometimes be the hurdle for people because I know in many design professions, the prevailing wage doesn't meet what the employer actually wants to pay you. And so our job as the immigration lawyer is to speak to the employer and explain to them that this is what the Department of Labor requires. So you have to pay this person at least this wage if you're going to sponsor them for the H-1B. So that's one avenue. Of course, you have to figure that out, a few months into your OPT because it's a process. You have to secure job offer. If it's an employer that's never sponsored anybody before, they're going to need a lot of hand-holding, a lot of information, and you want to be prepared. H-1Bs can only be filed one time each year, 1 week each year, and they're a lottery. So
Right now, though, I'd like for us to focus on if I have a business, I'm not going to H-1B, right? If I have a business and I'm working freelance and I see that I'm getting clients, right? Maybe I also get some clients from my home country. So I can still work in New York and have clients from my home country, especially if I'm a graphic designer and clients here. And my business is doing okay. What can I do after the 12 months to move forward? Should I incorporate with American, somebody who's a U.S. citizen? Should I?
for almost every employment-based immigration category, you need a sponsor. So even if it's your own business and you're consulting and you're getting clients and so on and so forth, that's great, but you still need a sponsor. So if your own company is going to sponsor you, that's one route. If not, then you have to find another sponsor that's going to sponsor you, give you a formal job offer, which you'll accept. The O1 is the extraordinary ability visa category. That is another one that's pursued quite a bit by design and professionals, artists and whatnot. But you have to have achieved a certain level of acclaim already in your field to qualify for the O1, but you still need a sponsor. There's not very many ways where you can work for yourself. There's the E2 investor visa, which if your country of nationality has a treaty in place with the U.S., then you can invest a large sum of money into a U.S. business and you can obtain the E2. Again, it's a large sum of money. There's lots of requirements around it, and your business and the investment amount and all of that would need to be evaluated in order to see if you would qualify. Yes.
When you say that the H-1B is like a lottery,
Yes,
does that mean like even if you're a sponsor, like you have everything?
you have
can
everything.
not have
There's no guarantee. Yeah. It's like a completely random selection. So it's not a very great option, but it's for oftentimes after OPT, it's the only option, because unless you have won tons of awards and exhibited your work widely and have been published about in lots of media in your field, and you've written articles and you've done all of these things and you satisfy the requirements for an O1, or you're going to invest $100,000 into a US business, the H-1B is usually the only route after the OPT. Yes.
And the date to apply for that is October, right? So
The H-1B,
yeah.
April.
Oh, it's April?
Yes. It starts October 1st. So the application is filed in April. The lottery is run April, May. You find out whether you made it or not, sometime over the summer. I mean, we have cases that are still pending. And then if you get it, then you start working in H-1B status on October 1st.
Okay, because, all right, so if I graduate like December, for example, I can apply next year or
You can apply in April,
in April?
or your employer can sponsor you in April.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
okay, but like the process to start is in October. Sorry, what's
If
the term?
October is when you would start an H-1B status. So your employer would sponsor you in April, and if you get the H-1B, October 1st is when you begin in H-1B status.
Okay, all right.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yes.
Two questions. First, how many rounds of H-1B are there? Is it just one? Because I have heard if I get a, I have one more year to go. I
Mhm.
graduate in May 2020.
Mm-hmm.
But if I start applying now, say November, December, and maybe I get a job, can
Mhm.
I ask my employer to file for an H-1B without working?
Yes. So every April is until they change. As you might have read in the news, there is regulation pending. They're trying to change the H-1B program. But as of now, you can be sponsored in April of each year. So some people are in STEM OPT and they're working for an employer and they have like 3 years, so they have 3 shots at being sponsored for the H-1B. Mm-hmm. Yes.
So when you say we have free shot, does it mean like if like next year I have the OPT and I don't get to be sponsored, like I'm sponsored but the H-1B is not given to me,
Mm-hmm.
can I still stay?
Are you a STEM? Are you a science, technology, or engineering, or math? No. Okay, no. So you only have one shot. For science, technology, engineering, or math majors, they have more time on OPT, so they have more chances. But for regular OPT, there's just one chance. But you could complete your OPT, go back to your home country, and an employer sponsors you again. You don't have to be here to be sponsored for the H-1B. You can get a job. There's people who live in lots of different countries, and I know of a couple of software developers that are living in Ukraine and Russia, and they started doing consulting work for U.S. company. The U.S. company loved their work and sponsored them for an H-1B. They are not educated in the U.S. They've never lived here. They haven't visited recently, but their work was good and they met all the requirements, so they were sponsored. Any other questions? Okay, well, I hope that was helpful. I, as usual, probably don't have any business cards, but I'm sure that if you'd like to get in touch or have more questions, we can circulate my contact information.